on my mind a little bit today as we would have been celebrating the opening day of baseball in St. Louis, across Missouri, and across our country a week from today. I'm thinking about it and finding myself with the lack of sport options that are out there to go back to some movies that I've always loved. To go back to certain films, certain TV shows that I've loved dealing with sports, and perhaps my favorite sports movie of all time, and one of the highest or the top of my list ever is Field of Dreams. And there's this wonderful scene at the end of Field of Dreams. I'm sure you'll remember it, and I'm not going to do it justice here as much as it should, but I want to share these words. You can look it up later on from James Earl Jones, and you can compare the two of us, I guess. Ray, people will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't fathom. They'll turn up your driveway not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children longing for the past. Of course, we won't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person. They'll pass over the money without even thinking about it, for it is money that they have, and it is peace they lack. And they'll walk out to the bleachers, sit in shirtless sleeves on a perfect afternoon. They'll have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines, where they sat when they were children and cheered on their heroes. And they'll watch the game. And it'll be as though they dripped themselves in magic waters. The memories will be so thick they'll have to brush them away from their faces. People will come, Ray. The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It has erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, it's a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us all that once was good and could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come. Baseball, and I love football, I love basketball, I love hockey. In fact, when Sarah and I first started dating, that was the question of what sport I did not like. But baseball is unique among all of these loves. Maybe baseball is that first love, unique among all the other sports because it is the one sport that has the richest and the deepest memories. All one has to do is say numbers, and immediately die-hard fans, people connected to the game from their youth, will know what is being referenced. If I say the number 56, you'll think of Joe DiMaggio. If I say 61, it's Maris, 61 home runs in 1961. 56 for DiMaggio was that hitting streak, consecutive games. If I say 400, you might think of a few people, but most recently, although it's been 80 years ago, think about Ted Williams and hitting 400 in 1941. If I say 2,130 or more updated, 2,632, we know that's Lou Gehrig and Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive games played streak. Long before we had the internet, and at our farm in Stratford, we didn't get the internet until way, way, way after I had left. But long before we had the internet, we had something that was just as good, or maybe, dare I say, even better. And these were baseball cards. And as much fun as it was to see players, their images on the front of the card, the true joy was to turn around the card and to read the stats, to read the facts about the players. They would always have an interesting factoid, but to get that knowledge and to see what they hit, what their batting average was 3 years ago, how that compared to this past season. We would memorize these things because baseball remembers. It provides a link to the past, but also baseball is unique because in many ways it is a hope for the future. Any other year, I don't necessarily think about the start of spring occurring on on the day in March I think about it, the hope for it begins with spring training down in Florida, but spring begins for me on opening day. It doesn't matter how cold it is, how wet it is, how dreary it is. That's when spring starts, not on a calendar, but in a memory. And so I think back about Field of Dreams. I think back about James Earl Jones talking about baseball with Ray and Ray Kinsella, and the whole beautiful monologue that he gives is that people remember. They'll hand over $20 because it's money they have, it's peace they lack. Makes me think of the great hymn by Fosdick, who says, cure thy children's warring madness, rich in things but poor in soul. It means that we have so many things. We're rich in so many things, but in the things that really matter, we're poor. Money they have, but peace they lack. They'll come and they'll remember. And as we yearn for a time, and perhaps maybe that yearning is more tangible for you today, as we yearn for that time, I encourage you to think about baseball and to think about the church and to think about what our collective calling is. We are first and foremost throughout the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, the New Testament scriptures, we are called to remember. We are built on memory. I oftentimes talk about this at funeral services, at service of witness to the resurrection. I talk about we are given two gifts, the gift of storytelling and the gift of memory. So the memory comes first. And when we remember something, we bring the past into the present, and it hopefully allows us to see more bright future. But through our memories, if that were all that they were, if that was all that we had were memories, we'd be lost, because the thing that memories feed are stories. Stories give memory meaning, and baseball is filled with them. And the church, too, the scripture is filled with them. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures, we hear, remember, remember, remember. Throughout the New Testament, we hear, do this in remembrance of me. Even when the Israelites were exiled in Babylon, they're told to remember. By the waters of Babylon, we lay down and wept. But we remember thee. We remember thee. We remember thee, Zion. Baseball and church have additional things that are in common. There are cathedrals where we meet. There are small churches. There are smaller minor league baseball parks. But there are cathedrals where thousands will join together in brighter times. There is that shared experience of being together, of sitting together. It's one thing to watch something on the television or to be online. It is something else to be together for the joys and the heartaches. And there is a liturgy as well. We know between the top of the seventh inning and the bottom of the seventh inning, we know it's time to stand up. We know in the doxology and other places in the church liturgy, just by instinct, we stand up. Both have calls and responses. I say, the Lord be with you, and you would say, and also with you. If I were to say, da-da-da-da-da-da, you would say, maybe charge. That's as close as I'm getting to singing today. We're saving that up maybe for Sunday. They both call us to remember and to create new memories and to allow these things to build upon each other for strength for today and a bright hope for tomorrow. Our daily lectionary passage is from Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 46. The apostles are gathering around Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. And Jesus says to them, come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. Well, that's one thing we have right now. Be careful, I guess, what we wish for is we're all perhaps in a deserted place right now as we are socially distancing and isolated from one another. But Jesus says you need that time, and use that time wisely, carefully. Scripture continues, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns ahead of them, and they arrived ahead of them. As Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus began to teach them many things. Think about that, about the importance of leadership in times of crisis, the importance of people who are just looking for guidance. Hopefully we are providing some of that with God's help at St. Mark. But let us know if there are things, if there are blind spots, if there are things that we are missing. Please do not hesitate to contact us, and we'll strive to improve upon that. Jesus begins to teach them, and it goes on for a while, and it grows late. Remember, the people don't even have time to eat. His disciples come to Jesus and say, this is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat. But Jesus answered them, you give them something to eat. You give them something to eat. And they said to him, are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them to eat? And Jesus said, how many loaves have you? Go and see. When they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit together, to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples and set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate, and all were filled. And they took up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces and of fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After saying farewell to them, he went up on the mountain to pray. May this God's word speak to our hearts, our minds, our spirits. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We are called to remember. Maybe even in hearing in this account from Mark's gospel, you might remember there are things that are left out. There's no story about a boy who willingly gives up his loaves and fishes. There are other things that are left out we might remember. You might also remember that Jesus fed 5,000, but then later we hear about him feeding 4,000. Memory is a powerful thing because we hear those 2 stories. Why are they both included? Well, one story is for here and one story is for there. One story is for the people that are normally thought to be on the inside. And the other story is for those on the other side of the water, the other side of the boundary, the other side of that religious divide. And that Jesus fed them both. Wherever you are hungry today, wherever you're hungry physically, emotionally, spiritually, pay attention to that. Even in tears, we're told, Frederick Buechner says, pay attention to your tears. Because in your tears, it reveals to us where our deepest hunger is. Pay attention, and if you are hungry today, if you see no food in sight, may there be a remembrance. May there be a richness and a deepness to know that the God who has fed us in the past is the God who will continue to be with us and feed us. May there be a memory for you that even as baseball is not starting when it should, even as we are apart, to remember these things, to remember and to live into a hope, because the past is history is never past. In fact, it's not even past. I butchered that a little bit, but it's a great thing. I'm not sure if it's Faulkner or Flannery O'Connor who said. But Jesus has mercy on the crowd. Jesus has mercy on us. So my encouragement for you today is to remember your baptism, remember your calling, remembering who you are, and remembering whose you are. May God bless you. May God be with you. May God give you the strength of memory this day. Looking through the St. Mark Spark, looking through the comments, I'll do that really quick. There's a lot of hellos. There's a few folks who have been to the Field of Dreams site. I've not been there. Iowa is clearly a hopping vacation destination, so maybe that's in the near future. Yes, I am. Yes, I am wearing a Kansas City A's hat. It's intentional. It's also the other hat I had in my office because the A's left Kansas City. They left Missouri in the late 60s, and so I never experienced them playing baseball here. They were in Oakland long before I was born, but the great thing about baseball is that baseball remembers. The great thing about even these things, these visual reminders, is they pull us back, and also they push us forward. So as we go forward, may God bless you and keep you, and don't forget to ask any questions you might have. I'm always looking for strings to be pulled, so if you have anything you'd like me to discuss, to be in conversation with you all, I welcome that. May God bless you this day.